Most people who fail DHS don't fail because they don't know accessibility. They fail because they answer the questions with the wrong test condition. And I have seen experienced accessibility professionals fail this exam not once, not twice, but at least 4 times. So what exactly is the problem? After discussing it with multiple DHS testers, mapping the test conditions and looking at the sections that appear again and again, I noticed a pattern. People who pass aren't necessarily the ones who know more accessibility. They are the ones who understand how the exam works. And in this video, I'm going to show you the 5 sections that carry the most weight. The system I would use to approach every question, and 5 mistakes causing more failed attempts than any other knowledge gap. And mistake number 5 is probably something you are doing right now. And before I break this down, do one quick thing. If you are preparing for DHS exam, comment DHS below, because that tells me that you are on this journey right now. And I will use those comments to decide what DHS topic I should cover next. And if you want more practical accessibility breakdowns like this, subscribe to the channel, because this video is not just passing one exam. It's about learning how to think like a real accessibility tester. Let me ask you a question. When you started DHS training, where did you begin? Section 1? Of course you did. That's where everyone starts. Not because it's the most important section, but because it's the first section you are allowed to open. DHS training portal is built sequentially. You complete one section and then you unlock the next. That seems reasonable, but that structure creates a hidden problem. Because by the time you finally reach Forms section 5, you have already spent hours and hours studying audio, flashing content, CSS positioning, and dozens of other conditions. Your brain is tired. Your notes are getting messy and you're already thinking about finishing. That's exactly when Forms shows up. The largest section in the entire process. The section that appears more consistently in the exam than almost any other. And most candidates rush through it. They tell themselves, I will come back later. Most never do. And on the exam day, suddenly Forms is everywhere. Now they're wondering why they keep seeing questions they don't feel confident answering. The problem wasn't lack of effort. The problem was preparation strategy. If this is already helping you see the exam differently, hit the like button so I know you want more breakdowns like this. Now, if I were preparing again, Forms would be one of the first sections I mastered, not the last one, because it has 8 test conditions, the largest section in the process, and DHS loves testing the tiny differences between them. Now, you might be thinking, but Param, how am I supposed to jump to Forms if DHS modules are logged? And I have got great news for you. DHS also provides a PDF that you can use while preparing for DHS. So my advice is simple. Don't rely on the logged training modules while preparing. Download the PDF, keep it open and use it as your map. Because once you understand which sections carry more weight, you can truly study more strategically, instead of waiting for the portal to unlock everything one section at a time. And if you want the PDF link, comment DHS PDF below and I will share it with you, because most candidates don't fail due to accessibility knowledge. They fail because they apply the wrong rule. And here's a perfect example. Test condition 5A asks whether a visible label exists, what the user sees. Test condition 5C asks whether the programmatic label exists, what Andy reports. So 5A is asking whether label exists on the page. 5C is asking whether that label is linked to the input field or not. Same form fields, but 2 completely different evaluations. A field can pass one and fail the other. That same label passes 5A, but fails 5C because it is not linked properly. And DHS absolutely expects if you know the difference. So never assume 2 conditions are asking the same question just because they are evaluating the same element. And before we move ahead, quick update. I have published part 1 of my DHS Trusted Tester series. And this one is important if you struggle with marking test conditions correctly. In that video, I explain how VCAG success criteria maps to DHS test conditions, how to think through the TTCP model, and how to decide whether the correct result is pass, fail, or does not apply. And this is where most of the candidates lose marks. Not because they don't know accessibility, but because they don't know how to apply the DHS process accurately. So watch part 1 after this video. Now let's talk about the section that quietly impacts everything else: keyboard access. Most people think they understand keyboard testing, and conceptually they do, but that's not where the marks are lost. Marks are lost because candidates confuse pass with does not apply. That distinction sounds small, but it's not. If there are no keyboard focusable elements on the page, several keyboard conditions don't pass. They don't fail, they simply don't apply. That single distinction appears again and again throughout the exam, and DHS knows candidates struggle with it, which is why they keep testing it. This section looks harmless. Only 4 conditions. Most candidates don't worry about it. That's a big mistake, because this section contains some of the most deceptive answer choices in the entire exam. Take 10B, heading determinable test condition. You might see an answer that says fail because the heading is too short. Sounds reasonable, sounds professional, and sounds accessibility related. And it's completely wrong, because 10B doesn't evaluate heading length at all. The condition only cares about one thing: does the visual heading matches the programmatic heading? That's it. The exam constantly places plausible sounding wrong answers next to the correct one. Your job isn't just knowing accessibility, it's knowing what the condition actually tests. This section catches people off guard, especially 13A, because it sounds easy until you start seeing it everywhere. A form field turns red when there's an error. No error text, no icon, and no explanation. Just a red outline. That's a failure. A sales dashboard shows available product in green and sold out products in red. No labels, no status text, no icons, just colors. That's a failure. Did you notice a pattern? The issue isn't using color. The issue is relying on color alone. And once you start seeing that pattern, you can't unsee it. And suddenly, 13A becomes one of the easiest to mark in the exam. Now let's talk about the section that causes more chain reactions than almost any other: images. Not because the conditions are difficult, but because the first decision before you evaluate anything else, you have to answer one question: is this image meaningful or decorative? Sounds simple until you're staring at one of the images where the answer isn't obvious. When you get that decision wrong, everything else starts falling apart. A wrong test condition, a wrong DNA outcome, a wrong elimination process, and finally the wrong answer. That's why I don't think this section is really testing images. It's testing classification. It's testing judgment. And the better you get at making that first decision, the easier the entire section becomes. The real difference between passing and retaking DHS can come down to one answer. Let's fix that with the system I would use for every single question. Because in this exam, 1 mark can be the difference between passing and retaking. 1, not 10, not 20, just 1. And that 1 mark is usually lost in the same place. Not because you don't know accessibility, but because 2 answer choices looked correct and you didn't have a system to separate them. So let's use a real example. Test 10B, heading determinable. The condition says each programmatically determinable heading is a visual heading, and each visual heading is programmatically determinable. That was a tongue twister, and that sounds technical. But here's what it really means. If something looks like a heading on the page, Andy should identify it as a heading. And if Andy identifies something as a heading, it should also look like a heading on the page. Both directions have to be true. Now here's how I would approach the question. Step 1. Read the condition first. Not the answer choices, not the sample page, the condition. Because the condition tells you what matters. For 10b, the condition is not asking whether the heading is descriptive. That is 10a. It's not asking whether the heading level is correct. That's 10c. And it's not asking whether the heading is too short. That is not the part of this condition at all. 10b is only asking, does the visual heading match the programmatic heading? Step 2. Open the sample page. But don't start testing immediately. Just look at the page first. Let's say you see a page with 3 visible headings. Skillsing empowering you to master web accessibility videos and related resources. Your first job is to build a visual map. What looks like a heading? Where are the content sections? What text is visually acting as a section label? Then step 3. Open Andy, go to structures, select headings. Now Andy identified web accessibility videos and related resources, but is missing Skillsing empowering you web accessibility heading. That means you have a visual heading that is not programmatically determinable. That fails 10b. And in this example, Andy is showing something else marked as H3. But on the page, it's a paragraph, not a real visual heading for a section. That also fails 10b. Why? Because now you have a programmatic heading that is not actually a visual heading. That is the part many people miss. 10b works in both directions. Visual headings must be programmatic. Programmatic headings must be visual. And then there is a third check, the one people miss the most. Reviewing the Andy output for each heading and comparing it with the visual heading. If the visible heading says related resources, but Andy output says additional links, that heading is not properly defined programmatically. Even though there is a visible heading, even though Andy found a heading tag, it still fails. Why? Because the programmatic heading does not match what the user sees visually. Step 4. Now go back to your answer choices and eliminate. If one answer says not tested, remove it. 10b is not one of those conditions where the document tells you to mark it not tested because of tool limitation. If one answer says DNA because there are no headings, remove it if you already saw headings visually or in Andy. Now you are down to the dangerous answers. And this is where I need you to slow down when 2 options both sounding right. This is where DHS gets tricky. You may see one option that says fail because Skillsing empowers you to master web accessibility is visually presented as the heading but is not programmatically defined. That matches 10b, but next to it you may see another option that says fail because account overview is too long to be a proper heading. That sounds accessibility related. It even sounds reasonable, but it is not 10b. Heading length is not what this condition is testing. The condition is testing whether the visual heading and programmatic headings match. So don't choose the answer that sounds generally accessible. Choose the answer that matches the exact test condition. That is the system. Read the condition, open the page, observe first, verify with Andy or the correct manual method, eliminate the obvious answers, then slow down on the hardest. When 2 options sound almost correct. And if you still can't decide, flag it and move on. Because a fresh brain later in the exam can solve what a tired mind cannot. Now, once you have that system, you're already in a much better place than most candidates. But here's the part I don't want you to miss. A system only works if you know where it usually breaks. Because most people fail under pressure. They fall into the same predictable traps. They read too fast. They assume 2 conditions mean the same thing. They see an issue and immediately jump to pass or fail. They stop testing after the first thing looks correct. And on keyboard questions, they sometimes never even touch the keyboard. So before you walk into this exam, I want you to know the 5 mistakes that cause people to lose marks they should have never lost. Mistake 1, mixing up the test conditions that sound similar. And this happens a lot because DHS has conditions that live close together and sounds like they are testing the same thing, but they are not. For example, in the images section, 7a and 7e both involves image, but 7a is asking whether a meaningful image has an accessible name. However, 7e is asking whether a text has been presented as an image when it could have been a real text. Those are not the same test. Same section, same broad topic, but different conditions, different rules, and different answers. This is why you should read the test condition thoroughly before you read the answer options. Mistake 2, applying the right concept using the wrong rule. This is when you understand the accessibility criteria but apply the wrong DHS requirement. A good example is auto-playing audio versus auto-updating content. For 2A, auto-playing audio that lasts more than 3 seconds needs a way to pause, stop, or control the volume. And in Trusted Tester process, that mechanism needs to be within the first 3 focus tabs. But for 2C, auto-updating content like a carousel, the pause, stop, or hide has a different placement rules. It needs to be near the auto-updating content within the required before or after the location, not just somewhere random on the page, and definitely not in the first 3 tabs. So yes, both conditions involve content changing or playing without the user asking for it, but the rule you applied is not identical. And that is where candidates lose marks. Mistake 3, choosing pass or fail when the correct answer is does not apply. This is one of the biggest exam traps because does not apply feels like a non-answer. But in DHS, it is often the correct answer. If the content required for the test condition does not exist on the page, you don't force a pass or fail. You mark it DNA. For example, if a page has disabled form elements, then the form-related test conditions are neither pass or fail. There is simply nothing to test. The exam is not asking, did nothing go wrong? It is asking, does this specific condition apply to this specific page? And that question changes everything. Mistake 4, stopping halfway through a test condition. This one is painful because the candidate starts correctly but stops too early. Take 10B, heading determinable. Many people open Andy, go to headings, see that headings are listed and think, okay, headings are programmatically defined and they mark it as pass. But that is not the full test. You also have to check whether every visual heading is identified by Andy. Then you have to check whether every heading identified by Andy is actually visually apparent on the page. And then the part people miss completely, you have to review the Andy output for each heading and compare it with the visible heading text. So presence is not enough. Match is what matters. That same pattern applies across the exam. Mistake 5, trying to evaluate keyboard conditions without actually using the keyboard. If you are answering keyboard questions with a mouse, you are not testing, you are guessing. You cannot find a keyboard try by clicking around the page. You cannot validate focus order by visually scanning the layout. You cannot confirm on focus issues without moving focus through the page. If you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. The DHS exam rarely defeats people because they don't understand accessibility. It defeats them because they apply the right knowledge to the wrong condition. Read the condition, identify the content, follow the process, and let the condition tell you what matters. Do that consistently and you will be already ahead of most of the candidates sitting this exam. If you are preparing for DHS, tell me in the comments which one of these 5 mistakes you have made before. I read every comment. I'll see you in the next video. This is Param Singh signing off.